Very good morning. Myself Dr. Ruchi Gupta. Today we will discuss a topic JDBC, that is Java Database Connectivity. So as we all know that if we want to connect the Java with some database, and there is a need of some connectivity. So without connectivity we cannot access the information from the database. So that's why there is a need of connectivity. We will use a various type of database drivers. The need of drivers are also required for database connectivity. So here we have discussed about the connectivity with the Java. So we need some JDBC drivers. So first of all, we have to know what is JDBC. So JDBC, Java Database Connectivity. It is a Java API. Basically, we can say that it is an interface through which the Java is connected with the database. It is used to connect and execute the query with the database. So it provides the language with the Java database connectivity standards, and it use some to write programs. With the help of these programs, we can access the query, we can execute the query, we can insert, delete the query from the database. So there is a need of some connectivity. So JDBC, along with the database drivers, we can access the database and spreadsheets. So there is a need of some drivers. So as suppose if we want to connect the Java with the Oracle database, or we want to connect the Java with the SQL database. So there is a need of some specific driver which we have to connect with the Java. So for example, if we are connect the Java with the Oracle, then there is a need of Oracle driver. If we want to connect the Java with the SQL database, then there is a need of SQL driver. So it is necessary that first of all we have to load the driver, a particular specific driver which we want to connect the database with the Java. Then we have to open the connection and then execute the query. So a driver is needed to access the database. So the enterprise data stored in the relational database, as we already know that the data is to be stored in the relational database, and we have to just access that data with the help of JDBC API. So we have to connect the database driver, and with the help of this JDBC API, we can access the data from the database, and the data which is stored on the database, we can execute, we can access or fetch that data. So if we have to write the program, then and we want to connect the Java with the database, then we have just first of all we have to import the package SQL. That is import. We have to just import package SQL. So it means that we need to access the database. So there is a need that we have to just first import that package.sql, and after that we have to just create the class, and under this class we have to create the connection with the database. So we can use this JDBC API to access the tabular data stored in the relational database, and with the help of this JDBC API, so we have to just access the data from the database through this JDBC API. So it is just like an open database connectivity, ODBC, that is provided by the Microsoft. So we can say that ODBC and JDBC is just like a similar, but there are some difference between ODBC and JDBC. ODBC, it is written in C or C++, while the JDBC, it is purely written in Java. So we can use this because we have to know that Java is a platform independent language. So we can use this anywhere. So nowadays, instead of using ODBC connectivity, in all the places we have to use the JDBC connectivity. So how we can interact with the database through this JDBC API? So this is our Java application. This is our JDBC API, and we need to install or load the JDBC driver first. Until we have to load this driver, we cannot access the data from the database. So it may be as you wish. As per your choice, you can connect with the Oracle driver. You can connect with the load the SQL driver. So as per your requirement, you have to just first load this JDBC driver, then only you can access the data from the database. This is a necessary condition for accessing the information from the database through this Java application. So JDBC, it is a specification that provide a complete set of interface. So once we have to just create this JDBC connectivity, so we can use a different types of executables like Java applications, Java applets we can use Java servlet, Java server pages, and enterprise Java beans, and all these servlets, server pages, JSP, Java beans, they all are executed on the server side. They all are a server side technology basically. Now, what is the use of JDBC? So, as we told you that before this JDBC, we had used the concept of ODBC, and before this JDBC concept. So, ADBC was it was also a API, just similar to the JDBC. So it was used to connect and execute the query with the database. But in ODBC API, the drivers, as I have already told you, that the drivers which are used in ODBC connectivity, it is written in C language. That is a platform dependent or unsecured language. So that's why there is a need of some secure platform or some independent platform. So that's why we have just now we are using here JDBC, because it is purely written in Java, and it is and we know that one of the feature of this Java is security. So it provides the security also. That's why Java has defined its own JDBC API that use JDBC driver that is written in the Java language. So, and it is also create the Java enterprise environment so that we can execute some servlets or Java beans or JSP, because they all are execute on this J2E environment, not in J2SE environment. So, interacting with the database, it is efficient database connectivity. It provides a efficient connectivity, that is instead of using this ODBC connectivity. So the driver which is used in the JDBC connectivity, the purpose of these drivers is to interact or communicate with the various kind of database such as Oracle, MS Excel, SQL, SQL Server, etc. Means, as I have discussed, that we have load that particular driver through which we have to access that database. It means if we are if we want to use or access the information from the SQL server, so we need to first need to load that SQL driver, then we can only access the data from the SQL server. So we can use JDBC API to handle the database using the Java program. So there are certain activities which we have to perform, then only we can access the data from the database. So first of all, it is in JDBC API, it is used to connection for the database. It is used for executing the query and update the statement. We can update the query, we can insert the query into the database. We can also retrieve the results from the database. So first of all, we have to connect the database, then only we can execute the query and we can access the result. So there is a difference between ODBC and JDBC, because both are connectivity API. So first, as I already discussed, that ODBC, it is a open database connectivity, and JDBC, it is a Java database connectivity. JDBC, it was introduced by Microsoft in 1992, and JDBC, it is introduced by Sun Microsystems in 1997. So it is later after the ODBC, there are certain problems in ODBC. That's why there is a requirement of some another technology. So Sun Microsystems developed this JDBC. So next, ODBC, it written in C, C++. It supports C, C++ or Java. And if we are talking about this JDBC, it only support the Java language. So next, we can choose ODBC only for the window platform. This is one of the restriction with ODBC. That's why there is a need of some another API. So in JDBC, we can choose any of the platform. We can run our applications on the Windows, Unix platform, or some Linux platform, or some Macintosh, or any other platform. Mostly ODBC driver developed in native language like C or C++, while the JDBC, it's only written in Java language. That's why it is a platform independent. So in ODBC, the performance may be down, but if we are talking about this JDBC connectivity, the performance of this it may increase because it will provide us some security features. It is procedural, and JDBC it is a object oriented because it written in Java, and we know that Java is a support the object oriented. Now, what are the components required for JDBC? So they are basically there are 4 main components of JDBC which are required when we have to connect the Java application with the database. So the first is we need JDBC API. The first we need JDBC API. Why? Because it provides a interface for communication with the database. So first of all, we have to use the Java API, Java database connectivity API, and it contain, we are using here some Java standard environment as well as Java executive environment also, because it support us Java executive environment, because we have to just execute some like servlet, JSP, they all are execute in the server side technology, and there is a need of some executive environment. Now the next we need another component, that is JDBC driver manager. As I have already told you that through which we have to connect the database, we need to first load that particular driver. So it load a database driver in the application to establish the connection with the database, and it is a specific call to database to process the user request. Now there is a need of third component, that is JDBC test suite. So it is a test to operations such as insertion, deletion, updations that is performed by the JDBC driver. Next, we need some JDBC ODBC bridge driver. So it connects the database driver to the database. And the purpose of this bridge driver is to translate that method call to the function call. So these are 4 major components which are required for JDBC connection. Now, how we can create this JDBC architecture, how the function will be performed, how we can connect the application with the database. So we need some architecture. So JDBC API support 2-tier or 3-tier, both type of architecture model for the database. So JDBC API, it provide JDBC manager connection. So first of all, Java application will connect to the JDBC API, and after the JDBC API, we have to just load that JDBC driver, that driver. Then we have to connect to for the particular database. So this is a 2-layer or 3-layer architecture. So then JDBC driver API, it support the JDBC manager to driver connection. So the JDBC driver manager, it ensure that the correct driver is used to access each data source. Means JDBC driver is basically defined that the driver which is loaded, it is correct or not. It means if I just want to access the query from the SQL database, So first of all, we have to need to install that SQL driver. So driver manager, it is capable of supporting multiple concurrent operations for heterogeneous database. So there is some architecture that how we can connect with the database. So this is our JDBC architecture. So first of all, we are setting on this Java applications. So what is Java application? We have to just write some program to connect with the database. We want to connect with the database, so we have to just write the program here. Then there is a need of JDBC API. So API, it provides an application to JDBC manager connection. So is this JDBC API manager and database specific driver, it provides a transparent connectivity to the heterogeneous database. Now, after this JDBC API, we need some JDBC driver managers. So we have to load that manager driver, a specific driver through which we can connect the specific database. So this database driver manager, this JDBC driver manager, it ensures that the driver is used to access the data source, and the driver manager is also capable for multiple concurrent executions for the heterogeneous database. Now, we have just specifically installed that particular database. For example, as we have seen here, if we want to connect with the Oracle database, then first of all, we need to load that Oracle driver manager. If we want to connect with the SQL, then we need to load this SQL driver. Or if we want to connect with the MySQL database, then first we need to load the SQL driver. Then only we have to just access the information from all the database. So first of all, we need to load that particular driver. So this is our whole architecture, that how we can interact with the database. So how this Java application will interact with the database? Through this JDBC API and then JDBC driver manager. Now these are the components through which we can connect and execute the query. First of all, the driver manager. So the class manages a list of database drivers. As I have already told you that if I want to connect with the Oracle, then we load Oracle driver. If we connect with the SQL, then we load the SQL driver. So the class manager manages a list of database driver. It matches a request from the Java application with the proper driver using that communication. So the first driver recognize the sub protocol under this JDBC connection. Now the next driver, it is an interface between Java application and the database. So the interface, it handles the communication with the database server. We will interact once we have to load that driver, so we can directly interact with that particular database. So we directly connected with the driver objects very rarely. So we use driver manager object which manage object of this type. Now the connection, this interface will with all the methods used to creating the connection with the database, and then we have to just create the connection object. So then we need to create this statement object. So the purpose of this statement object means you use this object created from this interface to submit the SQL statement to the database. Means if I just want to submit some statement to the database, then we need to create this statement object. So then we need to create the object of the result set. So the object hold data retrieved from the database after execution the SQL query using the statement object. Means the query which is executed by the statement object, we want to retrieve that data then we need to create the result set object. Now, the SQL exception, this class handle any error that occur in the database. So, these are some basic components which are required or some objects which we have to create once we have to create the connection with the database. So, this is the architecture as we have already discussed in detail. This is JDBC API driver manager and JDBC driver, and how we can connect with this Java application to the driver. Now we come on the JDBC driver. As I have already told you that we need to load the driver. So there are certain type of drivers we can load. So there are 4 category of the drivers. The one is JDBC ODBC bridge driver. Second is a naive API driver, which is called partially Java driver. Third, it is a network protocol driver. It is a fully Java driver. And thin driver, it is also a fully Java driver. So in today's environment, we are using these 2 type of driver, that is network protocol driver or thin driver, because ODBC drivers, this is a totally based on C language. So we are not using nowadays. Next is a naive API. It is a partially Java driver. So we also not use this such driver nowadays. Now currently we are using 2 drivers, that is network protocol driver and thin driver, and both are totally fully Java drivers. So first of all, we have discussed about this JDBC ODBC bridge driver. So if we are working in Java 8, so if you are working before Java 8, then there is a need of this JDBC ODBC driver. But if you are working in Java 8 or further advanced version of Java, then in that case there is the JDBC ODBC driver not supported here, because it has been removed from this before after the version of 8. So what is the process working of this JDBC ODBC driver? So JDBC ODBC driver use ODBC driver to connect the database. So here we have to just connect the method call to the ODBC function calls. So these are the function calls of ODBC driver to the method call of the JDBC driver. So this is the process that how we can connect. So here is this is your ODBC driver. So we need some JDBC ODBC bridge driver, and what is the purpose of this? It will convert your JDBC method call into the ODBC function call. So but now we have to discourage it without this driver. Next category is a native API driver. So the native API driver, it uses a client-side library of the database. So here it uses the client-side libraries on the client machine, and the driver, it convert the JDBC method calls into the native calls of the database. And now it is entirely it is not written in Java. So currently we are not using this native API driver. Advantage of this driver, it is upgraded version of this JDBC ODBC driver, but there are certain disadvantages of this driver also. The native driver, it needs to installation on each client machine that connect with the database. This is one of the major drawback of this driver. Secondly, the vendor client library needs to install on the client machine. So we have just replaced these 2 drivers with the next driver, that is a network protocol driver. So network protocol driver, it uses some middleware. It uses the middleware concept, means one is a client side and another one is a server side. So protocol driver, it is use a middleware application server that convert JDBC call directly or indirectly into the vendor specific call database protocol, and it is fully written in Java. So nowadays we are using this network protocol driver. The advantage is that there is no need of any client-side libraries required, because application server can perform many tasks like auditing, load balancing, logging, etc. But there are certain disadvantage of this driver. Network support is required on the client machine. There is a need that we have to just use the network connection from client to server. It requires a data specific coding, and maintenance of network protocol is very costly. Now we use another driver, that is a thin driver. It converts the JDBC call directly into the vendor specific call, and that's why it is called a thin driver, and it is fully written in Java language. So currently we are using this thin driver only. Advantage, it's better performance than other drivers. No software is required at the client or server side, but it depends on the database. This is one of the disadvantage of this driver. Now we come on that how we can create, once we have to load that particular driver, now how we can connect the connection. So these are some 5 steps for creating the connection, JDBC connectivity steps. Number 1, register the driver class, then create the connection, create statement, execute the query, and then finally we have to close the connection. So these are very important 5 steps which are required for connectivity with the Java application to the database. So the first step, register the driver class. So how we can register this driver class? So first, this method is required for name. So for name method of the class, it is used to register the driver class. So what is the syntax of this driver, load the driver class? For name method. So we have just right here public static void main, for name, string class name, and throw. So for example, I just want to register the Oracle driver class. So how we can write this? Class dot for name, it is a method of this class. And I just want to install that driver, Oracle driver. So I have to use this resource. Look at URL oracle.jdbc.driver.oracle driver. So once we have to register this Oracle driver class, then second step is to create the connection object. So for the creating the connection, we need a get connection method of driver manager class that is used to establish the connection with the database. So they are basically for creating this connection or open that connection, we use 2 main type of syntax method. First, public static connection, get connection. Here we have to just give the string URL and throw exception. And the second method we can also use, it is similar the first one with the first one, but in this method we can also use along with this string URL, we can take the string name or string password here. So for example, I just want to establish the connection with the Oracle database. So what syntax we are using here? Connection.con. It is used for creating the connection. So we have just create the object of the connection. Con is the object of the connection. So connection con is driver manager dot get connection. And where we have to connect, because we have just load the Oracle driver here. So we need to connect with the Oracle database. Where we have to create this Oracle database. So we have just give the URL Oracle thin localhost. Then we give the string name. Then we have to just give the string password. This is our second step. So once we have to create the connection, then we create the statement object, because statement object is basically used to take the query. So we have to just create this statement method for the connection interface that is used to create the connection. The object of statement, it is responsible for executing the query with the database. So if I just want to execute the query with the database, so we need to create the object of that statement. What is the syntax of this statement method? We have just public statement, create statement, throw, then we have to create this the statement object of this statement method. So statement stmt, it is the object of this statement. Then we have just con dot create a statement. Con is a object of this connection. So with this, and after this, after creating this statement object, we have to just execute the query. Suppose if I just want to join two query, insert the query, so we have to just write down the syntax for that. Then after statement, the next step is to execute the query. So in the execute query, we need execute query method of statement that is used to execute the query of the database, and we can fetch the results from the database. So this method, it returns the object of result set that we use to get the records of the table. So what is the syntax of this execute query method? Result set execute query, then string SQL execute query. So here we have just create the object of this result set, and we call here the object of this statement object. So statement dot execute query. Now here you can execute the query. For example, you have just select from EMP table, then print the strings first name, last name. If you want to join the query, then you have just take two tables from the database, select for example one from the employee table, another from the department table, and then you can join the query. You can execute any of the statement and store the results on the database. So we need to just execute this result set. So while this is the syntax, while result rs dot next, then system dot out println result int rs dot get string 2. Now once we have to execute this query, then finally we have to just close the connection, because this is one of the essential step of the database connectivity. If we are open the connection, then there is a need to close that connection also. So this is the last step, that how we can close the connection. So for closing the connection, we need to create the object of that connection, close. So by closing the connection, object statement and result set will be closed automatically. So the close method of the connection interface, it used to close the connection. So the syntax of this close method is public void close through exception. Then how we can close this connection? Con dot close. Okay, so con is the object which we have created at the time of connection open, creating the connection. So con is the connection of connection, object of connection. So we have just closed here that connection. So we have to just write that con dot close. Okay, so understood that how many steps we will follow for the connection creation, JDBC connectivity. So basically these 5 steps are we have to taken for JDBC connectivity, and this is just a simple example that how we can create the connection. So first of all, we have to import SQL package, then create the Oracle class, then this is your first load, driver the load class dot for name. It is a method of driver class. Then we have to just load the driver. Then in second step, we have to create the connection through this connection object. Then in the third step, we have to create the statement object. After that, we have to just execute the query with the result set object, then perform the operations on the database, and then finally we have to close the connection. So these are the steps that how we can create the connection with the database. Thank you so much.